Then they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. "Baal, answer us," they shouted. But there was no response. No one answered, and they danced around the altar they had made. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them. "Shout louder," he said. "Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened." So they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. I am your host, Naomi, and this is Mosaic in Progress. As usual, check the description of the episode for content and trigger warnings. That passage was from the New International Version of the Bible, 1 Kings chapter 18 and verses 26 through 28. Why am I reading from the Bible? Seems a little off topic for me, a little out of character. Well, I have a good reason. Today, I am talking about prayer. And if you grew up fundamentalist evangelical like me, you probably heard about prayer more than you could count. And in addition to the prayers before every single meal that you ate, and sometimes snacks, and the great debate over whether you should pray over snacks, there were prayers before bed. You were told to pray often. If you had any kind of problem, you were told to pray about it. People talked about having a prayerful spirit, a prayerful attitude. It was more of my life than almost anything else was prayer or thinking about prayer. Or thinking maybe I didn't pray enough, or I didn't pray the right way, because you had to pray the right way. You had to use the right words. You had to be in the right attitude. You had to have the right belief. You know, if you prayed something and didn't believe it, well, it just wasn't going to happen. And as a witch now, to me, that's so interesting to see that how so much of the Christian community, the way that they view prayer, is really just manifestation with extra steps and guilt. Because in order to manifest something, you just believe that you already have it and focus on the gratitude for having it, and then it's yours. Christians view prayer in this way, like they have this idea that God is all-powerful and all-knowing, and you just ask him for anything and he can give it to you. But if you don't believe it, it won't happen. Like he couldn't go, "Here you go, you unbelieving little weak whatever. See, I can do it." No, he's not going to give it to you if you don't believe. You have to believe for him to give it to you. And it's exactly the same principle as manifestation, but they think that manifestation is the devil's work. I'm going to read you something else. Number 1. One should strive to act with compassion and empathy toward all creatures in accordance with reason. Number 2. The struggle for justice is an ongoing and necessary pursuit that should prevail over laws and institutions. Number 3. One's body is inviolable, subject to one's own will alone. Number 4. The freedoms of others should be respected, including the freedom to offend. To willfully and unjustly encroach upon the freedoms of another is to forego one's own. Number 5, beliefs should conform to one's best scientific understanding of the world. One should take care never to distort scientific facts to fit one's beliefs. Number 6, people are fallible. If one makes a mistake, one should do one's best to rectify it and resolve any harm that might have been caused. Number 7, every tenet is a guiding principle designed to inspire nobility in action and thought. The spirit of compassion, wisdom, and justice should always prevail over the written or spoken word. Those are the 7 fundamental tenets of the Satanic Temple. The first time I read them, I was still a member of the church and teaching Sunday school to third to 5th grade, I think it was at that point in time. Or maybe it was when it was 4th to 6th. At any rate, I was teaching Sunday school to kiddos. And I read the 7 fundamental tenets of the Satanic Temple, and I thought, who has lied to me about Satanists? Who told me all they want is just to do whatever makes them happy, whatever feels good, with zero regard for the world around them? And for the first time, really, in my life, I became very, very, very curious about what other people believed. And in a way that was extremely healthy for me, not in the way that I had been living my entire life. Like, let me figure out what they believe so I know how to argue with them to convert them to the gospel. I really wanted to know, because I had never in my life considered the possibility that other people really wanted to do what was right. And that's a shocking thing to say, and it is a horrific thing to admit. But I was brought up with this idea that people just want to do what they want to do, and they don't care if what they're doing is right. They just want to have their own ideas, and they don't want to be held to a standard. They don't want to admit the consequences of their actions, that they're going to go to hell. They don't want to believe that. They don't want to admit that. They just want to live happy, carefree lives, and that's why they're so unhappy. That's how I was brought up. And then I read that and I thought, wow, these people actually want to do what's right. And then I was like, well, then why do they follow Satan? Satan's supposed to be, Prince of Darkness, the first liar, all the things that you're brought up with. And so I looked into it. And the Satanic Temple is not actually a worshiper of Satan. It was a response to doctrines similar to what I was brought up with. And it is an organization that believes in autonomy. And I was blown away. It rocked me to my core and set me on a journey of looking at other belief systems and trying to figure out what other people believed. And is this everybody? Does everybody really think that they're doing what's right? Because if you're raised to believe that the whole world just does what they want to do and they don't care about what's right, you believe it. And I don't think people really fully grasp what it means to be raised fundamentalist evangelical, because however your parents raise you, it forms your brain. Your brain anatomy literally forms itself around however you're raised. It structures itself to adapt to and function within the environment you're raised in. If that's neglect, you learn how to be unsafe as your default, which means you're going to accept a whole lot of neglect and abuse as you grow up, as you become an adult. And if you're raised fundamentalist evangelical, your brain forms itself around the idea that the entire world is your enemy, out to destroy your immortal soul, drag it down with them into the depths of hell. You can't just undo that with a little bit of reading. Like, it's not just an ideology. Your brain forms around this idea of being unsafe spiritually. And also, especially if you're a woman, the idea that you really can't trust anything you read, because you're brought up also with this idea that things that sound logical and make sense and contradict the Bible are wrong, because the Bible is the only truth, and anything that contradicts it is wrong, evil, and designed to appeal to your intellectual prowess, your ego, your sinful nature, so that you'll leave God and be drugged down to hell, because that's Satan's goal, is to take as many people down to hell with him as he can. You can't just undo that. Like, a little reading and figuring out how completely illogical that is doesn't undo it, because your brain immediately goes, do I believe this because it's true, or do I believe this because Satan has tricked me? It does appeal to my logic, and it does contradict the Bible, so maybe I'm just being evil. The Bible says if people sin too much, God gives them over to a reprobate mind. This is the reality for deconstructing fundamentalists. I recently watched the Shiny Happy People documentary, and I will probably do an episode on it soon. But the entire time I was watching it, I think I cried through at least half of it. And I'm pretty sure I traumatized my husband, because I forced him to watch it with me, because I was like, see, this is shit I was brought up in. Now you know why I'm this way. He was horrified. But watching it and seeing all these, just horrifically abusive cult-like mentalities, I was just like, how can anyone really get out of this? Because if you're brought up in it, it's not just like, oh, let me just kind of do some therapy and work through this bad idea, bad way of thinking, bad belief system. Your brain literally formed with that ideology. It's like spending your entire childhood with a patch over one eye, where you don't really understand how reality works fully. You don't fully have your depth perception, because you're missing out on core experiences. And then suddenly the patch is removed. Well, yay, now I can fully see, but this one eye doesn't actually know how to work, and it doesn't know how to work with the other one because it's never had to. That's what it feels like. And the thing that has struck me the most recently is prayer. And that ideology that you have to pray about everything, and prayer fixes everything, and prayer is the answer to everything. So I grew up hearing my mother especially talk about prayer. My father did too, but not to the same level that my mother did. And I think mostly that was because as I look back on it, I didn't really have a lot of like personal in-depth conversations with my dad. There was like sermons and Bible studies and dinner table lectures, but I honestly really didn't have like a relationship with him. At any rate, my mom talked a lot about praying. You know, you have this problem, you pray about it. You have this sin problem, you pray about it. And she talked a lot about my dad's problem with his temper and her problem with her tongue. She always talked about how she had a biting tongue, how she had trouble controlling her words, and how they prayed about it a lot, and they prayed about it, and they prayed about it, and they prayed about it like every night, and they would pray for each other, and for some fucking reason nothing ever changed. They prayed about it all the time and nothing changed. It's almost like saying you're praying about a problem that you personally need to work on is just an excuse to say, I'm trying to let this mystical higher power fix me, instead of taking responsibility for my own actions. And this is the Christian narrative. And it's not just in the fundamentalist evangelical church. This is the Christian narrative that you can't fix yourself. If you could fix yourself, Jesus wouldn't have needed to die. And so when it comes to your sin problems, you can't fix them. You need God. It takes every bit of your own power, your control of yourself, out of your hands and places it into the ether, because you're just too fucking weak and human to be able to change yourself. You have to put it out there for God to do it for you, and somehow it never works. You see these people, I grew up with this, I saw it in my adult life when I got into the church and into the Christian community. Everybody's praying about their problems, but for some reason, their problems never change. It's almost like you have to accept responsibility for yourself to really change. And it was honestly the most empowering thing to me and the best change in my life when I left the church. And it was no longer, I have this problem and I have to pray to this higher power to fix it for me because I have this temptation to do this bad thing, or I have this control issue with myself, or impulse problem, or whatever. I just said, I got a problem. Let me figure out how to fix it. What is the thing underlying the problem? Let me get curious about this problem. Is this problem really a problem, or is this serving a need? And if it is serving a need, could that need be taken care of in other ways? And getting away from this, I have to pray about it mentality was the best thing to ever happen in my life. Ever. To the point that I had zero interest in any kind of deity worship after leaving the church. There was, people who invited me to different circles or worship events or whatever, I had no interest in pursuing a higher power or a greater power or anything like that to have any kind of sway or control over my life. Because once I found my own power, I didn't need anything bigger. And this is why I read the tenets of the church, or excuse me, the Temple of Satan, or the Satanic Temple. I apologize, I get the names mixed up in my head sometimes, because that idea that you are divine, you are God, you are deity, and not God in the sense of the highest power in the universe. And Christians really take offense to that term, you are God, because they think God means omnipotent, omnipresent, you're everything. That is not what is meant by it. And even if it was, it's not your religion. Don't be offended by other people's religions. It's something that Christians have a really hard time with. They want everyone else to have that mentality that their religion should not be offensive, but they want to be able to be offended by everyone else's religion who disagrees with theirs. I digress. The idea that I was powerful enough on my own to control my own life was almost intoxicating. And I remember early in my friendship with my now husband, him sending me this podcast about Hecate, who is a deity that I now revere. I was a little put off by it at first. There was this initial reaction of, oh my God, she's been here my whole life. I feel like I should probably, say thank you or, do something. And I had a visceral reaction to my own thought. Because I was like, okay, but we're not doing that anymore. We're not praying about things anymore. We're not seeking help outside of ourselves anymore in the sense of some higher power that, oh, please help me. I'm too weak and small and stupid to do this on my own. I came around to the idea eventually as more of a relationship rather than a servitude. But it was something, and it's still something that I struggle with any kind of deity worship or revering. And that idea that you need them, that you're not enough on your own. And I've no doubt that if there are any Christians listening, they're probably thinking, well, there's your pride problem right there. That's your problem right there. That you think you can handle it all on your own. But here's the thing. And a lot of people in the church like to look at people who leave the church and tell them that they never really believed, they were never real Christians. I can fully tell you that even though I was brainwashed into it, I absolutely believed every bit of it with every fiber of my being. I lived it, I breathed it, I was it. It was my entire life. My everything revolved around it. My everything revolved around it. And it has taken 3 years for me to stop feeling guilty for leaving it. even though I was fully convicted when I left it. I prayed to the God that I walked away from when I left it. I asked you a little over a year ago to show me the truth, and what I am seeing now, I believe, is what you showed me. The truth, and the truth is that what I have been fed is a lie. That the Bible is the infallible Word of God is a myth. It doesn't hold water. And even if it did, this book is so flawed with humanity, with false interpretations and doctrines taken full of hate from its passages. It's not something I can follow with integrity anymore. And I said, I'm not sure that you're who I have always believed you to be. But if you are, you know my heart. And know that I am walking away from this with a clear conscience, in full belief that I'm doing the right thing. It almost broke me. And at the same time, it freed me. Because I could now look at the world with curiosity instead of judgment. And there is a power to curiosity. Because if you look at things with judgment, you don't really see them. You're picking them apart before you really know what they are. If you're looking with curiosity, you see the whole before you see the details. And then the details just add to your perception of the whole. If you're looking with judgment, you're already looking for details to pick it apart before you've ever seen the whole. And once you've started picking apart the details, the thing is no longer whole. The new moon was this past Monday, and it was also Hecate's night. And I honored her with a supper, as is customary for followers of Hecate. And that's really what got me thinking about this topic, is that at one time I thought I would never again pray to a deity. And my reverence of deities has grown since learning about Hecate and subsequently shrunk. At one time, I viewed God as a diamond, and each deity as a face of that diamond, and that each deity was a part of that universal power, and it was just a facet that humans experienced and named. And I don't necessarily think that that is completely wrong. Don't necessarily think it's completely right. It's a useful belief for me now, so I keep it. But it is a very difficult transition to go from, I'm struggling with this, I'm gonna pray about it. And there's this weird psychological thing that happens with prayer where you're like, oh yeah, there goes my problems. I feel so much peace now. I've given it to God. God's gonna take care of it, and I know He's gonna take care of it. And then there's this judgment that happens in the church where if your prayer isn't being answered, it's not coming true, or whatever you ask for isn't coming to you, then it's because you've, got a sin problem. You're blocking yourself from whatever you asked for because of your sin. God's not really listening to you, or you just didn't believe enough that he would do it. You got to believe a little harder. You got to really work on your belief. Then he'll answer your prayer. And it becomes witchcraft. And they don't even see it, because these are the principles of manifestation. And I always laugh when I see people saying things like that. Oh, you just gotta believe when you pray. You gotta believe. You gotta pray believing prayers. And I just want to be like, sounds like witchcraft to me. And it is. There's nothing wrong with that. Obviously, I'm a witch. I'm not going to judge somebody for performing witchcraft, but I think it's ironic that Christians, the majority of them, practice witchcraft in their prayers, don't see it, don't realize it, don't know it, and judge witches for doing exactly what they're doing. Because if God is all powerful and all loving, and you're his child, and you ask him for something, your belief should not factor into it. Is God limited by your belief or lack thereof? There's even a story about Jesus that talks about that. Someone asked him for help, and he said, "Do you believe?" And the person responded, "I believe, Lord, help my unbelief." He wanted to believe, but he didn't really. And Jesus still performed the miracle. So people who think that God can be limited by your unbelief seem to have not read the Bible. It's ironic. It's judgmental. It is a way of explaining away what really can't be explained. People don't understand the laws of the universe, laws of manifestation, laws of energy, how we attract or don't attract, and they think they understand prayer, and when it doesn't follow their understanding of it, their only logical choice, so that they can still hold on to their belief system, is to judge the person praying. I found so much more healing and help and peace when I stopped praying about my problems and started dealing with them myself than I ever did praying about them. And I think that a lot of people who leave the church find that reality. That when you stop trying to pray away your depression or your anxiety or your quote sex problem or your quote job problem or your quote money problem, and you just take responsibility for your own life or get the help that you actually need, suddenly the world opens up. The possibilities open up. Prayer is the thing that people use to hold on when they cannot figure out a way to do for themselves or don't want to do for themselves. It is a way of shirking the responsibility for your own life. No one likes to admit that. I have no problem with prayer or deity worship if it is done ethically, if it is done with a clear conscience. If you're trying to pray away your problem with cheating on your spouse, or pray away your depression without going to a therapist, pray away somebody else's depression and telling them that they don't need to go to a therapist, then your prayer is toxic. Your prayer is shirking responsibility. Prayer is a relationship with an energy can be useful. But prayer as a way to escape the responsibility of your life is childish at best and dangerous at worst. I hope that you've gained something from this episode, that it was useful for you in some way. If you have topic suggestions for the episodes, please email them to mosaicinprogress@gmail.com. We're everywhere you listen to podcasts as Mosaic in Progress. We're on Facebook and Instagram as Mosaic in Progress. Please follow, like, share. And I will see you next episode on the podcast as we both continue to work on our Mosaic in Progress.